Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we will discuss about the glucose transport into the cell. Um, First thing we talk about will be facilitated diffusion. We know what diffusion is. Diffusion is movement from higher concentration to the lower concentration, and it doesn't require any kind of energy. Okay, and facilitated means it is facilitated by something, and in this case it is protein, and mostly case it is protein. So for facilitated diffusion of the glucose, we have proteins. Okay, we name them glucose transporter type 1, type 2, type 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which are medicinally important. Like, but there are 15 types of glucose transporters in our body. Then, this is the diagram you have to see. These proteins are formed by the cell, okay, and they are just attached to the cell membrane. In what way? That they have their path outside also and inside also. When a glucose come, the outside part become open and it grab the glucose, and it grab the glucose and it take the glucose inside, and when it comes to inside, the outside part of that protein or transporter become closed and inside become open, and that way it actually take in the glucose. Okay, this is the simple mechanism of facilitated diffusion. So let's discuss about the different types of transporters. um, Glucose transporter 1 and glucose transporter 3, this 1 and this 3, they are in most of the parts of your body tissues, and most probably they are in central nervous system and red blood cells. Why they are in the central nervous system and red blood cells more? Because of their function, because they have high affinity for the glucose. It means like if you have low amount of glucose, it will work the same way. It will efficiently transport the glucose irrespective of the amount of the glucose. We know that it is diffusion and the uptake of the glucose depends upon the concentration of the glucose outside. But these two transporters have very high affinity for glucose, and we actually know that our central nervous system and our red blood cells are the two parts which need, like, every time a lot of glucose. Like it brain needs a lot of glucose, neurons, and red blood cells, they have to transport oxygen every minute, every second, so they need glucose every second. Nevertheless, your body has less amount of glucose or more amount of glucose, it has nothing to do with that. Then we have glucose transporter type 2. This 2, this two word actually tell us that it is a two-way transporter, and it is present in, mostly we say it is present in liver and um, kidneys. Why liver and kidneys? Because um, like for example, in the liver we need a lot of glucose. Like there is a lot of absorption of the glucose in the liver. So, and that some of that glucose is like going into the bloodstream. So it is a two-way transporter, that it absorb glucose also and it release glucose also at the same time. Same is case with the kidney. Kidney also through glomerular filtrate, it absorbs glucose and it releases the glucose at the same time. And very important, this glucose transporter type 2 is also present in the pancreas. Why pancreas need it? Like this is the specialty of the glucose transporter 2, that the glucose concentration in the extracellular and membrane and inside the cell the same. uh, like it is the concept behind, concept that glucose concentration is more in the extracellular membrane than inside the cell. And this is the case because obviously when there is a more glucose concentration in the extracellular membrane, only then it will be able to transport it into the cell. But in the case of glucose transporter 2, this glucose transporter 2, no, there is the same concentration of the glucose in the extracellular membrane and in the cell, into the cell. So it's very important for another organ. Can you guess? That organ is pancreas. Why pancreas? Because pancreas, I think you know the endocrine function of the pancreas. Pancreas need to be very sensitive towards the glucose concentration. Yes, it is the case. Like pancreas has beta and alpha cells, and that cells have to monitor and have to know the glucose concentration at every second. Okay, for that there should be an accurate, two-way transport of the glucose in extracellularly and intracellularly of the cell. That's why. Then go towards the glucose transporter 4. We know. Any guesses where it can be present? It is present in skeletal muscle cells and adipose tissues. Why? Um, like the answer of the why lies in its specialities function. So glucose transporter is dependent on insulin. Like if you have a lot of glucose in your blood, so what happens? Insulin amount increases. Okay, and that insulin go towards the cell of the skeletal muscles or into the adipose tissues. These are the tissues that store the glucose. So these skeletal muscles or adipose tissues have a mechanism. Okay, and that mechanism actually allows the insulin to work for them. How? The insulin attaches to the cell membrane of the skeletal muscles. Insulin attaches to the cell membrane of the skeletal muscle, and this uh, insulin gives signals to the cell, and the cell produces vesicles. And these vesicles, uh, it has a long story that these vesicles are produced by the signals from the nucleus, like through translation, and these proteins are produced, which are vesicles, go to the Golgi apparatus and so on. And these vesicles contains actually transporters. And these vesicles actually come and fuse with the membrane. And when they fuse with the membrane, we come up with what we call, what we know is this glucose transporter 4. So the speciality of this glucose transporter 4 is that this glucose transporter 4 works with the insulin, like works under the insulin. Like this skeletal muscles and these adipose tissues open for the entry of the glucose into the cell only when there is a lot of glucose, which means there is insulin in the cell. So this can clarify you about the function of the insulin also. Like with insulin works for the amount of the reduction of the glucose into the blood, and that glucose going to the cell of what? The skeletal muscles and adipose that are actually known for the storage of the extra glucose. Okay, now these are just one liner definitions as a glucose transporter 5. Any guesses for what it works for? Glucose transporter 5 are fructose transporters. They do not transport glucose but fructose. So, uh, like, don't we know that our body utilizes glucose only? What parts of the body utilize fructose? Yeah, it is gastrointestinal tract because, like, the food we eat, its breakdown not only produce glucose but also fructose and lactose. So our GIT cells, mainly our intestine cells, absorb this fructose, so they want to have the glucose transporter type 5 cells. Then testes utilize fructose mainly in our sperms. Human sperm cells utilize fructose. Then we have glucose transporter 7. Glucose transporter 7 uh, works with endoplasmic reticulum and it's do gluconeogenesis. What is the gluconeogenesis? Gluconeogenesis is the production of glucose. Yeah, glucose with new, you can say, source. This is the literal meaning of the gluconeogenesis. A new source is mainly proteins, amino acids. So, it is a transporter for the endoplasmic reticulum to do the gluconeogenesis to form the glucose from the amino acids. So that's it for today.